Hi guys, my name's Dave Thompson. I'm one of the pastors here at One Church, and we're getting right back into Christianity 101. This week we're going to discuss the law, where it comes from, why we got it, and where we can find it out in the Bible, and just kind of see what God's plan was with the whole thing with giving us a law. Starting off, I ask you, what do you know about the law? And the most common response is going to be the Ten Commandments. Everybody knows about the Ten Commandments. But if I was to ask you what are the 10, I know most people probably couldn't recite them off the top of your head. So I'm going to dig into it a little bit. I'm actually just going to focus on one of the commandments primarily throughout this. But before I get there, I want to discuss what led up. How God moved from the creation to the point where we got commandments. And just a little bit over the past couple weeks, you guys have talked about creation, and then the brokenness, and then the promise that was given to Abraham. So, starting in the beginning, God created paradise, and He put Adam and Eve there, and they had one job, one job to do, and that was just don't eat that apple, and but they did, and so that brought a brokenness into us. It wasn't just a brokenness within inside of us. It wasn't just a brokenness to the world around us, but it broke the relationship we had between us and God. So as you see over time, Adam and Eve. So you have creation and then brokenness, and then over time, God decided that He was going to pick one person. And He was through that one person, He was going to start to put everything back together, put all the pieces back. And so he picks Abraham, and he tells Abraham, if I can just get you right with me, then through you I will bless the world. So God approaches Abraham one day, and he's telling him, he's saying, hey, I want you to come out of there and just trust me, because one day I am going to give you this land, and it's going to be called the Promised Land, and I'm going to make a nation out of you. And through your nation, all will be blessed. And what I love about this is because God took one person and He said, you know what? The entire world is broken. The entire world is far from me, but I'm going to choose one person and I'm going to make him right, and that's going to be my starting point. So kind of like this is a starting point class for us. This is our Christianity 101. This was God's starting point to put the world back together. So He picks Abraham and He pulls him out and He makes him right with him just by faith and faith alone. And that's time and time again throughout the book of Genesis, you'll see that. And don't just take my word for it, read it. It's an amazing story. So Abraham, he comes out and he's living in the wilderness and in the desert because one day God's going to make a nation of him, and He's going to put him into the Promised Land. And now at this point in time, Abraham's rather old, and he has no kids, and so he doesn't know whether he can trust him. And in the end, he does trust him, and God gives him a son named Isaac. And through Isaac, he has two sons, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob winds up getting the blessing from Isaac, and he has 12 sons. And that's who later becomes the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of them's name is Joseph. We've all had this in our family somewhat, where that one sibling is the favorite. And that sibling gets everything they want. Growing up, they got 2 scoops of ice cream whenever we went out. If that kid wanted to go to the roller rink, we went to the roller rink. If I wanted to go to the roller rink, we didn't. And so what we see in this situation is Jacob, his favorite was his son named Joseph. So what he did is he gave Joseph a jacket, a coat. It was, had all these colors on it. And basically just to kind of show that he loved him, and it made all of his brothers jealous. So his brothers actually took him out and they trapped him in this pit, and basically we're going to get rid of him. And so somehow along the way, he's trapped in the pit, and then some people came around and wound up taking him to Egypt to be a slave. So while Joseph is stuck as a slave, he never lost hope in God, because he always knew that God would do something in his life. And he trusted God, and he did what he was supposed to do. And in the end, Joseph becomes the prime minister, per se, of all of Egypt. He's the second in command. The only person who has more power than him is Pharaoh. Now this is important because what's happening is God knows that coming up is there's going to be a famine where for 7 years there's going to be a great harvest, and then for 7 more years there's not going to be any harvest at all. So God sends this dream to Pharaoh, and he sends Joseph in to interpret it, and he discovers that if they save up all that they can for the next 7 years, then through Egypt they can feed the entire world during that 7 years of no harvest. And so whenever this happens, Joseph, he becomes the prime minister, and he's raised up, and over time, once the famine is hitting, Joseph winds up reaching out to his brothers and to his dad, and it says, hey, and it's a little bit more complicated. I'm just giving you the Spark Notes version, so just bear with me. Please read it. It's an amazing story. But he gets his family to move to Israel. And this is important because you basically have one guy. God started with one person who had one son. His name was Isaac. And then Isaac had 2 sons. So now you got 1, and 2. And then Jacob had 12 kids, right? Well, by the time that Joseph gets his brothers and his dad and everybody to move to Egypt, there's 60 people with them. So we see it progress, just getting larger and larger. And in the Bible, you kind of have a moment where 400 years pass. Basically, they come into Egypt, and then 400 years pass between that point and when we pick up in Exodus. And what happens is the Egyptians begin to fear that the Israelites are going to outnumber them one day. So they put them into slavery. They try to enslave them so that they don't keep growing, but they actually continue to grow. So at this point in time, there's 2 million Israelites, 400 years later, gone from 1 to 1 to 2 to 12 to 60 to 2 million over 400 years. And so God, he's created his people, and he's got a nation of people. Now these people have grown up in slavery. They've lived for 400 years in slavery. So God hears the people in Egypt. He hears the Israelites living in Egypt in slavery call out to him, and he raises up a man named Moses. And Moses, we've all heard the story. Moses is supposed to go and basically bring the Israelites out of Egypt so that they can finally go into their promised land. And as he goes in, and basically the Pharaoh, he fights back, and they go back and forth on it. And eventually, once all of nature just breaks loose and everything goes crazy, there's flies flying around everywhere, there's frogs climbing up in people's beds, water's turning to blood, cows are dying, hail's falling out of nowhere, and then finally everybody's first son dies one night. Pharaoh finally decides to let him out. In fact, he doesn't even just say, he doesn't even just let them out. He says, please leave. He says, get out. And so we wind up with Moses leading the Israelites into the wilderness. Can you imagine, just take a moment into their shoes. You don't know who your God is. You don't know what your purpose is. You don't know what freedom is like. For the past many years, if you had a child, it was killed because the Egyptians feared you outnumbering them. What do you do? What do we do? Now, before I go any further, I want to talk about something for a minute. Whenever we hear the word law, honestly, we go straight to our own law system we have. Whereas if we break the law, there's a consequence that comes with it. And that's not necessarily bad. It's good. It keeps order in our nation. Or how about this? Whenever you have a family, did you have rules in your family? Because you are a member of the family, you had to follow certain rules. Or how about, another place where we might get rules from is clubs and organizations, or maybe the work environment. If you're in a fraternity or sorority, basically you are only a member if you follow the rules. When you get a job, you have to sign off the handbook stating that you will follow these rules. And you will only be a member of that company if you follow these rules. And see, often we take our look at God and the laws that he gave us in this sense, the club sense. The sense that, he's only our God when we follow his rules. Or we only have a relationship with him when we follow his rules. But I'm hoping you'll begin to see that God's law that he gave the Israelites, and that through the Israelites is for all of us. That God's law wasn't a requirement for his love. That it was showing his love to us. That basically because we are part of his family, we get the rules. Not a requirement to be in his family by following the rules. And I love this because in the beginning of Exodus chapter 20, God comes out and he talks directly to the Israelites. And he says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Now that's important because I'm sure a lot of these people are standing around scratching their heads saying, wait, what? But we haven't done anything yet. We haven't done anything for you to be our God. No, God says straight up, right from the beginning, it's the first law that he gives them. I am the Lord your God. As in, you've done nothing for me, but I've chosen you. I brought you out of Egypt because I am the Lord your God. Before I even get to any of the rules, before I get to any of the regulations, I don't care if you sign. I'm here telling you right now, I am the Lord your God. And then, this is great, the first law he actually does give is, you may have no other gods but me. So, in all honesty, he first says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. I've done this because I love you. And the number one rule, the number one law, the first law that's important is you'll have no other gods but me. And see, this is essential. The reason this is so important is because we have the tendency to look at God's laws and say, it's too hard. I'm never going to mount up to that. Or even worse, I was doing really good in Sunday school and I rocked at it throughout my entire high school career. But the moment I got out and I had that one spring break, that kind of, it wasn't too Christian then. And what happens? We instantly think that we have a God that turns his back on us whenever we turn our back on him. We instantly think that because we don't follow the laws, that we have a God that no longer loves us. But what he's standing there saying, I am your God. I am your God who have brought the Israelites out of Egypt, and I will take you out of the situation that you are in as well. The important part is that I am the Lord your God. Now, if you take anything away from this, that's it. I want you to pay attention to that. Now, something else I want you to think about. Has there ever been a time in your life where you respected somebody so much that you were willing to do just about anything they asked you to do? Or just about anything they told you not to do? Have you ever respected somebody so much that even if you didn't understand it, if they told you not to do something, you wouldn't do it? You see, we like to take this idea of fearing God. We don't break these rules because we fear God. We don't do this because we are afraid of God. But that's not what God wants. God doesn't want us to be afraid of him. God wants us to respect him so much that whenever he asks us to do something, we don't do it. Or whenever he asks us to not do something. God wants us to respect him so much that whenever he asks us to not do something, we don't do it. Now, the last point that I want to bring up about the law is the idea of when you see as God sees, you do as God says. Now, I know, looking back whenever I was in high school, and I was taking those steps, I took major steps away from God. In fact, I was an atheist for quite a while. And looking back at that, I remember some of the things I would say. God just doesn't want me to have fun. God made these rules because he just doesn't want me to have fun. God doesn't want me to go out and drink heavily because he doesn't want me to have fun. God doesn't want me to go around and sleep around and have sex with as many people as I can because God just doesn't want me to have fun. But when you see as God sees, you do as God says. And the reason I say that is because whenever I see what my life turned into, what that type of living led to, I do as God says now. If you could see STDs and you could see teen pregnancy and you could see how broken so many middle school and high school girls are and how broken the boys are and the 50% divorce rate, if you could see that, then you would do as God says. So I'm telling you and I implore you that the laws that God gave us, they're not laws to inhibit our fun. They're laws to make us work. Because God took a people and he said, I am your God and you will be my nation. Now let me show you how to live. Let me show you how I want you to interact with each other. So just imagine. Imagine if we chose one command off the 10 Commandments. Just imagine if everybody in the entire world lived off of that one command. Imagine what the world would look like today. Thank you.